Welcome to New Wave Global. I'm Rabia Mehmood. New Wave is an independent news site which looks at the world through a South Asian lens and relies heavily on your feedback and support. Please do subscribe, like, comment, and also engage with our work so that we can keep improving. The Labour Party has won the UK election in a landslide victory. People are calling it a Starmageddon. The new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has announced his new cabinet already and also made history in the country by appointing more women in his cabinet than previous governments. However, even if the victory is landslide, the voter turnout was much lower than the past election. We have with us Shaista Aziz, political commentator, writer, humanitarian worker, and an anti-racism campaigner to speak about the UK election. She is also the former Labour councillor from Oxford and resigned over Labour's lack of support for Gaza after October 7 as a protest. Shaista, welcome to the show. You just published an opinion piece in Al Jazeera English where you analyze that the British public has predominantly voted against the Tories and not just for the Labour Party as such, and that the independent candidates must not be ignored. Can you please expand on this a bit for us?
Yes, so on Thursday, the UK had an election, and after 14 years of mostly disastrous Conservative rule, including Brexit, including the economy crashing, we have collectively removed the Conservative government from power after 14 years, and there is now a Labour government. This is the first Labour government since 14 years, so people are feeling some sense of relief that the Conservatives have gone because they have been a disaster for this country. Even Conservative voters did not want to vote Conservative in this election. As you rightly say, I wrote a piece for Al Jazeera, which was published yesterday. It provides clear analysis on what's happened in the UK. And what the figures and data show is that, yes, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer's Labour Party, has won a landslide victory, but that is not the full story. To look at the full story, as always, you need to look at the small print. You need to investigate the small print. And the small print is very interesting. It basically shows that Labour has won a landslide victory on one of the smallest percentages of the vote ever in British political history. So less than 36% of the actual vote went to Labour. And overwhelmingly, what the data shows is that the Labour Party has won this election because the Tory party's vote completely collapsed. So when I say collapsed, Rabia, I'm talking about 11 Conservative cabinet members lost their seats in this general election. That is a record. That is unheard of. Multiple prime ministers' former seats disappeared as well, mostly to the Liberal Democrats. But we're talking about Theresa May, we're talking about David Cameron, and we're talking about Liz Truss, the woman who crashed the economy and was in power for less than, I think it was 50 days in total. So this has been a complete disaster for the Conservative Party. And while it's important to mark what's happened here with the Labour Party, it's also important to look at the fact that 5 independents, overwhelmingly British Muslims, and most of them of Pakistani heritage, have become independent MPs. This has not happened in the UK before. Overwhelmingly, they stood for a ceasefire in Gaza, and they stood to listen to the communities that they represent. There's also been an increase in the share of the Green Party vote and also the Liberal Democrat vote as well. So this is a big change in the political map of the United Kingdom. And usually, as you said in your introduction, we have 2 parties who go into a boxing ring and slug it out, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, to win an election. This time round, this is not what's happening. There's been a dramatic shift in the way people are voting across the country.
Can you expand on the first past the post duopoly voting system in the country, and also tell us a bit more about the disruption which the independents have caused in a way, even though there are only a few, because the new health secretary, who basically won by, I guess, about 500 votes in his constituency, And the runner-up was a Palestinian, 23-year-old Palestinian woman, Liane Mohammed, about whom you spoke to us in your last interview. And he has admitted that the Palestine vote or the Gaza vote had an impact on how people have voted. So can you tell us a bit about that? And also how the percentage of Labour majority, right? I mean, the majority votes for the Labour has really reduced because the leads were much narrower for quite a few people. In fact, Keir Starmer's the number of votes Keir Starmer got in his constituency has also reduced by 11,000. I looked up the figures.
Yes.
So just sort of tell us more about this.
So let's start first with the system that we have in this country, which is deeply problematic and it needs overhauling. So the system is first past the post. So rather than making sure that a party that gets a percentage of votes gets the same percentage of representation in Parliament, what we actually have is an electoral system which only recognises first past the post. So for a number of years, there's been campaigning going on in the country for proportional representation, which is an elective system that is present in lots of parts of the world, including in most of Europe. And it's a system which distributes seats with the proportion of total votes cast, so that each party gets a percentage of seats based on the percentage of votes cast. That's not what happens in this country, in the UK. It's first past the post, which is a system that is simply not working, is putting people off from voting. We have very low voter turnout. We have a lot of apathy in this country. In fact, voter turnout in this election has been one of the lowest ever recorded. In 2022, at the Labour Party conference, Labour Party activists, at the time I was a member of the Labour Party, I was involved in this campaign. We were campaigning for the Labour Party to adopt proportional representation. And the motion was passed on the conference floor, yet the Labour Party did not do anything about it. And what I should have mentioned earlier on as well is that another party has four representatives in Parliament now, and that is the Reform Party, which has Nigel Farage, one of the architects of Brexit, in this party. Now, he yesterday has gone on record to say that he will be campaigning for proportional representation himself. Now, Nigel Farage is a very loud, colourful character. He's an individual who represents xenophobia in terms of the policies he puts forward, and there's a lot of concern around the rhetoric that he uses, which is very, very highly charged, particularly around race and refugees and migrants. And yet this man has had great influence on British politics over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. And so now he's in Parliament as an MP, he's going to have more influence. And he's already said that he's looking to reform the electoral system. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. I do think that more and more people are feeling annoyed about the fact that their vote ultimately is not counting because of this system. So now let's go and look at what you asked in relation to the vote shares of people like the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. So Wes Streeting is an MP for Ilford North, and he only managed to get back into his parliamentary seat through the skin of his teeth. He had a majority, which was around 5,000, I think, and it got squashed to just over 500. And this is because an exceptional young woman by the name of Liane Mohammed, whose grandparents are from Palestine, and she's a descendant of Palestinians who were dispossessed from their land, is a resident of the area. And she launched a campaign to become an independent parliamentarian when the Labour Party refused to endorse a ceasefire in Gaza. And we still don't have a ceasefire in Gaza. So her story is really remarkable, that she got within a hair's breadth of entering Parliament and unseating Wes Streeting. Similar stories have been taking place, particularly around Birmingham, which, as we know, is the UK's second populated city, and it has a big and significant and well-established Pakistani community as well. And in Birmingham, there has been a political earthquake in the sense that leading members of Keir Starmer's party have had their majority massively squashed. So we're talking about people like Rabia Mehmood, who's now the Justice Secretary in Keir Starmer's cabinet. She, her vote share has gone down from thousands and thousands, so we're talking about 30,000, down to under 2,000. So this is huge. And other MPs like Jess Phillips, who's a well-known MP here in the UK, she does a lot of work on women's rights and domestic violence. Her majority was reduced to a couple of hundred as well. So this has big implications for the Labour Party in the long run. And the shadow Paymaster General, Jonathan Ashworth, he lost Leicester as well. And again, this is no small feat. I think it's really important for people to know, the audience to understand, that what's happened is phenomenal. Mostly this has been done by working class people, and the media in the UK is very keen to emphasise the Muslimness of the activists and the now MPs who have entered Parliament. And of course, they are Muslims, many of them. However, they are not all Muslims. This goes well beyond the Muslim population. There are many, many people of all backgrounds in this country who oppose the Tory then government stance on Gaza, and also the then opposition leader Keir Starmer's stance on Gaza, and they've galvanized their vote around Gaza. However, they've also galvanized around poverty, around particularly child poverty, which is really high in this country, and around NHS waiting lists and many other things, including the cost of living crisis. So yes, Gaza has been central to the campaign, but it's gone beyond that as well.
You have also mentioned the MPs of Pakistani Heritage. So I want to speak to you a bit about the media's reaction, but it's not just the UK media or the Western media, but elsewhere as well. Shaukat Adam, who has won from Leicester South, I believe, there are articles up about him and his reputation, which are linking him to radical Islamists, and of course, linking it back to the tension between Pakistani and Indian heritage residents of that constituencies, and the role that he played, and somehow that's coming up in some of the news articles. Can you comment on this a bit, like this sort of targeting of him, or smearing, if we can call it that?
I will talk generally, Rabia, rather than focusing on individuals. So this has come as a bit of a shock to see 5 independent MPs elected in Parliament, particularly because they were focused and galvanised their support around Gaza. They are British Muslims, and this has, in some quarters, raised eyebrows. That's a polite form of me explaining what's going on. A lot of Islamophobic, racist rhetoric and nonsense has been sprouted about them. Some of them have been called Islamist, for example. There's a general tone in the air that how dare these people do this? How dare they get into Parliament? How dare they create political chaos, inverted commas? And the general kind of tone of this language and this kind of description of them is that really they should get in their lane. They have no right to be elected as MPs. And on one hand, British Muslims are told by many in politics that we are busy as a community trying to separate ourselves from the rest of the UK, which is not true. We've been told over many years that we need to adopt British values. No one can tell you what British values are. We've been told that we need to be more subscribed to a British way of life. Again, no one can tell you what a British way of life is. On the other hand, when British Muslims, like many British people, go to the ballot box and engage in democracy and decide that who they want to vote for and who they don't want to vote for, they are then accused of being Islamists. So this is completely nonsensical. It's also very dangerous. We have to be clear about that. It's seeped in Islamophobia and racism. And, at a time in Europe when Islamophobia is rife, and when on Sunday France is going to the polls again, and the far right, Le Pen's party, has a significant vote share, and it's possible that they could be in power, less than 24 hours, less than, I should say, 72 hours after a British election. I think that Britain needs to take heed about the way this framing of the independent candidates is taking place, and the wider rhetoric and sort of insinuation that when British Muslims engage in politics and in public life and political life, that there's a problem, and they get smeared. And the smearing of British Muslims is really simple. It's very easily done. I don't know anyone in public life here in the UK or political life who's not been smeared, who happens to be Muslim. It is deeply Islamophobic, what's going on, and very, very racist, and it needs to be called out for what it is.
Yes, and also, of course, with regards to the independents who have won, we can't not talk about Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party leader who was kicked out of the party over allegations of anti-Semitism, and he has now won with a significant majority in his constituency. So, and of course, Faiza Shaheen, who was deselected, and yet she managed to get votes, almost as many votes as the Labour candidate, who was not from that constituency as such. But in that constituency, a senior Tory leader has won, who played a part in Iraq war. If anyone wants to look him up, can you speak about this to us a bit?
Absolutely. So his name is Ian Duncan Smith, the Conservative, who I'm very sure he never expected to win. He got in by the skin of his teeth. With less than 80 votes, he managed to, I think there was a difference of 80 votes between him and this person who came second. And I think Faiza Shaheen is an incredible candidate. She's someone I know very well. She's a friend. Nonetheless, she's a very capable woman. I think what's happened there is something that people in this country need to take heed of, which is this time round, independents were standing, and many of them in some parts of the country, we had up to 10 or 11 candidates. Here in Oxford, we had 11 candidates standing. This is absurd. Nobody can galvanise around 11 separate candidates. So I think there needs to be a discussion around the future of independent candidates and how people go about being selected and how they can actually come together and unite behind one candidate. So that's what happened in the constituency that Faiza Shaheen was standing in. And now coming to Jeremy Corbyn, yes, Jeremy Corbyn won a huge victory in Islington. He has been an MP for many, many years and decades, in fact. People know who he is. They know what he represents and what he stands for. I think it was a big shame that the Labour Party kicked him out. I don't think that was acceptable. And really, the kicking out of Jeremy Corbyn speaks to the big tussle that has been taking place in Keir Starmer's Labour Party, where members of the left in particular have been ostracised or thrown out the party. And Jeremy Corbyn, I'm sure, feels very vindicated that he's won a big victory. And from people I know in Islington North, they told me that in particular, he received many votes from people and communities of colour, obviously not just people and communities of colour, but a large, significant percentage of the population of Islington North voted for him. And in fact, on the eve of the election, more people from the Labour Party resigned and put a letter out, a public letter out, explaining that they were resigning because they were disgusted that Jeremy Corbyn had been banned by the Labour Party from standing as a Labour candidate. So he has a lot of support. And it'd be interesting to see what happens now with Jeremy Corbyn, but also what happens with the independents, because I think really the independents are the story. It'd be interesting to see how they galvanise, will they work together as a group? What kind of things will they be pressing on in terms of policy and pushing the leader, well, not the leader, I was going to say the leader of the opposition, but he's now the Prime Minister of this country, and the party with a landslide in Parliament. What will they be pushing them on? And in particular, what will they be pushing them on with regards to Gaza? So, for example, there has been a clear call for Britain to suspend arms to Israel. Is Keir Starmer going to take heed of that? There's obviously a call for an immediate ceasefire. It is shocking and horrifying that 9 months on from the daily bombardment of Gaza, people continue to be killed. And it's unbelievable, I think, that that ceasefire is not in place. And also humanitarian aid access. So obviously these individuals are now in Parliament as MPs, and they've made it clear that they're there to represent Gaza, but they're also there to represent domestic policy as well. So let's see what they push on when they start their work in Parliament.
Yes, and speaking of the new party starting its work in the Parliament, what do you have to say about the new cabinet? We know that the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has spoken about immediate ceasefire. The new cabinet also has record number of women, parliamentarians in the cabinet. And the Justice Secretary Rabia Mehmood, the Attorney General is an international law expert. There has been this commentary online, and people are welcoming the fact that the new appointees know their subjects. How do you see that going forward?
So I think one of the interesting things about the cabinet and the new appointees of the cabinet is that data shows that actually this government, the new government in the United Kingdom, more of them went to public school. More of them, are kind of like normal people in the sense that they went to regular schools. Now, overwhelmingly, the political class from this country is from the upper classes, and most of them went to private school. They went to Eton, for example. They have a long track record of being graduates of elite private schools, I should say, and also most of them went to Oxbridge. This is not to say that this cabinet hasn't been to Oxbridge, but there's a different makeup in terms of class dynamics, which I think is interesting. There's a record number of women in the cabinet. I think it's important to state that most of them, nearly all of them, minus Shaista Mehmood, are white women. And I think that often in this country, when we talk about women gaining traction and breaking the glass ceiling, they are always white women. There are very few women of colour, so that needs to be rectified as well. But there's some interesting appointees there. As you said, Shaista Mehmood is the Justice Secretary. She is deeply unpopular in her constituency of Birmingham. She managed to get in by the skin of her teeth as well. So it'd be interesting to see what she does in this role. She's also gone on record to say that Keir Starmer needs to do more to reach out to the British Muslim communities, particularly around Gaza. So it'd be interesting to see if he takes heed of that. We have a very young Transport Secretary, Louise Hay. I think she's 36 years old. She's got a record of being a good communicator with the trade unions, for example. There's a lot of woe and concern around the transport system in this country, which is not working. In fact, all our public services are on their knees due to a lack of investment, due to the Tory government being at loggerheads with the unions in particular, and things are just not working in this country. So there's a lot of hope being put on the shoulders of this new government, and there's also a lot of criticism that's being heaped on them as well, and a lot of suspicion. I think it's important to be fair and to be clear that it's not everyone's not celebrating here. In fact, the celebrations are very muted. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of sitting back and wondering what's going to happen and hoping for the best.
Shaista Aziz, thank you so much for your insights and an explainer on the UK elections. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.